You're listening to the Business and Life Podcast, where 7 days a week, proven entrepreneurs share their success stories, failures, and give you true value on how you can build a great business and an awesome life. With your host, Mike Olivas.
Let's get cranking. Today we're chatting with Kosi Stobbs, who is the owner of Property Owl Investment Solutions, which is a business that buys operating companies and grows them using social media. All right, Kosi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for taking the time here. So tell us something interesting about yourself and then also where you're calling in from today.
You know, I'm calling in from British Columbia, Canada. So yeah. I live out in the Vancouver area. So it's a lot of, we got mountains, we got the sun, we got the beach, we got a lot of cool stuff. So it's I call it the warmest part of Canada, right? So it is Canada, but it's not, you don't get the super cold winters. So yeah, that's where I'm calling in from.
Yeah, I've visited UBC a couple of times.
Nice. Yeah, it's a beautiful campus, right?
Oh, very cool. It's awesome.
Yeah. And so that's where I'm from. And you said something interesting about myself?
Yeah, please.
I am a business owner, but aside from being a business owner, I'm very unique. You could tell by my hair, right? I don't follow any sort of like mold when it comes to this is how you should act, this is how you should dress, this is how you should be. I firmly believe just be who you are as you are, and that is the best product you can produce, right? Is this as you are. Don't try to sugarcoat change it. If you want to have purple hair, have purple hair. Some people believe that that'll hurt your business, and I just fundamentally disagree. I think authenticity, more than anything, is required today, and the truer you can be to yourself, honestly, the more money you'll make. Yeah,
no, I think being real is creates real money and real value, right? And a lot of people are just I always say jumping over fences and taking pictures with jets, right? And so, exactly. Like, oh, I'm an influencer now because I have this jet. And it's like, no, bro, you gotta have a little proof behind that, like how, right? So
yeah, exactly.
I think that's important, and I definitely agree with you. So tell us about your companies. I know you have several of them, and what they do actually.
Yeah, great. So I agree. I'm entrepreneur. I like to say I started my first business when I was 10, when I walked around the street collecting pop bottles, and then and then I kind of and returning them in. Made good money, was able to buy candy. But now, I really started in the real estate world and built up a portfolio, and then I started buying operating companies. And two of the main operating companies I own, one is called Specific Mechanical Systems, and they specialize in primarily breweries and distilleries, but any type of specialty welding. So specialty welding when it comes to stainless steel, copper welding, really, high-end welding, and kind of not only that, but also helping customers who have an idea to start a business. I want to build a brewery, I want to build a distillery, and kind of taking them from that concept phase to here's what the design can look like, and supporting them through that process. So that's Specific Mechanical Systems, and I also own an environmental cleaning company that kind of specializes working primarily with the oil and gas sector. It's called West Clean, and what they specialize on that end is really looking at how to come up with different cleaning solutions, environmental solutions to support a lot of these companies. There's a big thing happening in the world with regards to the need for gas as the middle class is growing in a lot of these big countries. And that with that comes a lot of the things to do with LNG facilities that are being built. And part of having LNG means, there's an environmental component that needs to be looked at. Okay. And what West Clean does is we look at solutions for, carbon capture, different things around that to help support that process, so that as they're kind of expanding their operations, we can help in reducing the amount of CO2 that's coming out. So that's really exciting for me as well. It's a company that has a solution to a really major world problem that we have today, right? So
is there regulations behind that where like the clients need to have something like that, or is it more of a bolt-on that you offer?
It's a bit of both, okay. Right? So there's definite regulations, and as different governments, and it's kind of different. Every government, Canada has different kind of guidelines than the United States does.
Sure.
Every government is basically coming up with their own guidelines to what's acceptable as these companies are building these systems,
Okay.
specifically the LNG systems. And part of that has to do with, Canada specifically has some really aggressive CO2 reduction targets. And part of the CO2 reduction targets is if they're emitting a certain amount of CO2, there's tax implications associated with that.
Got it.
And so they're kind of penalized if they do that. And a way to offset that is to, capture some of the CO2, so there's less penalties, right?
Oh, I see. So they're tax based if they go over, or they're tax based off of how much CO2 they output.
Correct.
Okay, very cool. Well,
and that'll be different based on every different country has their own rules, but effectively a lot of them are following similar models. But aside from that, it's just a global need for reduction, right?
Got it. Okay. Well, it sounds like it's something that's necessary, and you're helping a lot of companies out there do it. And in terms of we have a current situation, obviously, with COVID-19 and the outbreak that's affecting the entire world. What kind of pivots have you had to make, or how has it affected your business?
So in terms of how it's affected the business, I think I'm going to talk at a large, high level concept phase that I have first.
Sure.
And then we'll dig into detail. So I fundamentally believe, I've been in business and starting in real estate for the last 15 years, right? And I plan to, any company that I buy, I plan to own it for at least 20 years, if not longer. So it's something that I believe in, that we can do for the next 20 years, 30 years. So when you have that time frame, a lot of companies, they come in, they want to be there for 2 or 3 years and get out, or a year and get out. My vision is 20 years. So when you have a 20-year vision, you approach things a lot differently. So I believe over 20 years, we will have multiple downturns, right? Whether it's COVID-19, global financial crisis, we had 9/11, recessions will happen, depressions will happen. So when you build out a 20-year plan, you can't build out a 20-year plan and expect that it's going to go up for 20 years. Your expectation has to be that there will be points and times over that 20-year period where you will see downturns. So what do you do as a business owner for downturns? As a business owner, you prepare for downturns before they happen. And a good way to do it is you have a plan of okay, if I don't have any revenues coming in for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, what do I do? What does that look like? And it's a question that you have to ask yourself, because it's happened before. Maybe not to this extent, and it will happen again. Maybe not to this extent. It won't be COVID-19 for sure. It'll be something else. And we don't know what it'll be, but we know that definitely we'll see other downturns. And the way that you guard against that fundamentally as a company is the same way that you guard against it as a person. As an individual, if you were to get fired today, say you're working at a job, you're going to get fired today and you can't work for 12 months, 6 months, 12 months. What do you do? And the solution to that is you start saving before. Right? And you make sure that you've got savings set aside that if the lights go off, you can last for 6 months, 12 months. We take the similar approach when it comes to businesses. So with the companies that I own, and I can't speak for the companies that I own, we look at it before and we say that something could happen. And how do we guard ourselves in the event that happens so that, we can manage through, because we want to be here for 20 years. And part of that has to do with us, looking at your outlook and what that looks like, making sure you're staffed accordingly. And then also it has to do with making sure you have enough cash reserves and you're being smart about the capital that you have and how you allocate it, right? So capital allocation is critically important in times like this today. Now, for the people that are in it and living it, and they didn't plan and they didn't prepare, it's not easy. It's not hard. It's not easy for anybody, but it gets worse when you haven't prepared yourself financially. And I think if anything, and this stuff happens every 10 years, and every 10 years, as things are going up, people think that they can't ever come down, right? And I think that's the biggest, one of the biggest reasons why that short-term outlook, why so many companies fail. I think a lot of companies will fail. And it's sad.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. And a lot of people are going through really bad economic times. It's sad and it's unfortunate, but it's reality, right? It's reality. And the fortunate part is we will get out of COVID-19 from a business perspective. And,
sure.
and it's great that we are going to get out of this and we're going to recover from this. Yep. It's been a horrible loss, but we will persevere. The unfortunate part is a lot of companies that are around today won't be around 2 to 3 years from now. And a lot of that has to do with, and it's not only COVID-19's fault. The reality is it's not COVID-19's fault per se.
No,
it could have been anything. Could have been something else. Fundamentally, as business owners, they weren't prepared for the long term. Like we saw 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, companies already starting to shut doors.
Yeah.
Like if you're set up that you can't go 2 weeks, then there's a much bigger problem within your organization, how you're leveraged and what you're doing.
And I think a lot of them, Kosi, I think a lot of them probably could have. I think they gave into the fear. I think a lot of, and there's both, just twofold. There's some that just weren't, they weren't cash flow ready. A lot of those are going to probably likely be the restaurants. There's going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of companies that you're right, that will just stop, that will just fail, BK and or simply shut down. Right. And you're right. And a lot of it is, we're going to wait for funding. And that just is not going to come for months and months. And it's not, right. And so I think a lot of them gave into the fear of saying, I'm going to take whatever I have now and eat versus I'm going to take whatever I have now. And what they should do, like we're all likely doing, and most entrepreneurs that see the opportunity in this obstacle, is double down on whatever you can. Like, no, actually push harder. Pivot harder, be more creative, right? This is where people are able to, those that get through this are going to kick some major ass when the time comes when we open back up, because they're going to be prepared for an influx of cash that they're going to capitalize on. And hopefully companies should be focusing on their systems, their operations. They should be creating better products or services, packaging those products and services. So when the time comes, they can hit the go button. Right. And if they're not doing that, then they're not just innovating, and they're likely going to just wait. And those that wait are going to be eons behind those that pivot. Right.
Exactly. Right. You're 100% right.
What's happening, Life Nation? Michael Levis here. This is a time to do the right thing, not the profitable thing. I'm giving away COVID-19 business strategy sessions for free. I promise to give you my honest advice and coach you on a strategy that I feel would be best for the longevity of your business. I'm not asking you for your money. But in the interest of being able to help as many people as I can, I am asking you to be ready with your 1 to 2 specific questions so we can jump right into it. Go to michaellevis.com/coaching and simply schedule a call on my calendar. That's MIKEOLIVAS.com/coaching. What specific advice would you give to the current business owners out there right now that are just going through this epidemic, that are just as scared as what we just discussed? Like many have, employees that are closing their doors, or many that just let go of their employees. Like, what kind of advice would you give people that are listening right now that are going through the fear aspect?
As we go through it, I never want to minimize reality, right? The reality is that it's a tough time for everybody. Right. And even for businesses that are still open and they're seeing a major uptick, it's a tough time for them. They're having to manage their organizations, and a lot of their employees are fearful. Right. And
that's
I think what it is today is we need to have really honest and open communication about what we know, and more importantly, what we don't know. Right. There's a lot of things that we don't know, and we just need to be open and honest about the situation it is and the reality, right? Now's the time to just communicate as a business owner, to communicate the facts of the situation to your employees. It's not the time to say, we're going to run away and hide and say, this is not a, you know what I mean? Like that we're not dealing with this and so communicate the reality to people. Right. And if you've got a long-term vision and say, hey, maybe the situation is, look, hey, we've got to take a stance now, and we have to let some people go in order to make sure that 6 months from now, 12 months from now, we are still viable as an entity. Right. And we need to slowly work back in so that long-term we are strong as an organization.
Right.
Right. Talk to your landlords. Right? If you don't own the space yourself, talk to your landlords, communicate openly and honestly about the reality of the situation, right? See what it is that they can do to help support you. They may say nothing, right? And they say, either you pay or you're out, and that's the reality. And they may say, hey, This is what we can do to work with you. Tell them about your long-term vision if you have one, and say, hey, let me do this now, and then this is my plan to work back and catch back up with you. But I think really what it is, Mike, is we just got to be really open and honest. One of the biggest challenges that I have, and it's from the way that has been communicated with a lot that's happening with, COVID-19 and how it's been communicated, one, from the media, and two, from government, is I have a feeling that they've come out and said if they tell us the hard truth about what's happening, that we will run and we will be scared and we will do crazy things, right? So they've limited the information that they give. Now, what happens when people get limited pieces of information? We fill in the blanks ourselves of what the rest of it is. If you're not going to tell me, I fill in the blank. And the blanks that they fill in end up being far worse than what the reality is.
Yeah.
So they owed it to us to tell us this is what's happening. This is exactly what's happening. This is there's a bunch of models that they're running, and then they don't tell us the output of the simulations that they're running. Well, what is it? What is it? What is the simulation saying? What was it saying in January? What was it saying in February? What was it saying in March? What was it saying in April? What was it saying in May? We understand that it's changing, and it's forever going to change. But communicate what the reality is, so that we can then say, okay, here's what it looks like for my future, right? Because we don't know, like, is this a month? Is this 2 months? Is this 6 months? Is it a year? What are you guys seeing? How's the information changing? How does it impact the young? How does it impact the old? How is it morphing? How is it changing? Instead, I feel like all I'm hearing is, this government's bad, this government's good.
They just keep injecting fear.
What did you say back in January? What did you say back in February? No, what's happening today? Where are we going in the future? So that is fundamentally all the way down. It's transparency, and there's been a huge lack of it from the government level. There's a huge lack of it from the media. The media has actually been worse. What I've learned from media sources is that they've lost touch with just communicating the reality of situations. They're more focused on providing headlines that engage people to click. And
100% agree. That's what I mean. It's a big reason. I don't think I've watched the news since and you're right. I don't think I guess to go kind of a follow up to that. That's probably a big reason why I don't watch the news. And it's not that it's I just don't I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know what the curve is anymore. It's just, as a business owner and as, business and life that are listening out there and understanding that you have your own metrics. And you have to just at some point realize from a business perspective, knowing not everyone's probably as analytical maybe as Kosi and I, because I'm a very analytical guy as well. And you're right, the deliverables that the media and whoever might be giving is not specifically probably tied to what, hey, this is when it's opening back up. We don't know. It's always based off more and more tests, et cetera. But reality of it is your own numbers and you know how to forecast those. If you haven't became an expert at cash flow forecasting, then you should. Then you should be watching the videos on that, building a skill set that allows you to understand on a very higher level and to at least understand hey, this is when I probably should close the doors because I need to eat. That's it. That's kind of where the survival of the fittest right now. That's and here's what's necessary. Here's what's not. I always tell people and my clients, let's take a look at your P&L. Let's highlight what you do need and highlight what you don't, and everything else that you don't, whether it's a person, sadly, or whether it's a service, there's so much money that we're able to save people by just doing simple things like that. So going down and seeing what's necessary, that's like the government's doing, who's necessary and who's not, right? Yeah, we got to do it within our own specific lives, our own specific company. We know that. I know it's not necessary to have a gym to stay in shape because I do it right here in my living room or on the beach behind me. And so that's very possible, but what's necessary and what's not is really important as a business owners and you listeners out there, I think. And Kosi's actually giving you some knowledge bombs here. Guys, try to pay attention to the numbers and understanding your own. I think what we get out of this is understanding your own metrics of what are those base points, right? What kind of resources, have you found any resources out there that you feel you can share that it might be helpful for other people? Or, it's not obviously CNN or Fox News or MSNBC, but, things that might be more supportive or YouTube's maybe?
Yeah. You know what I find to be really helpful for me personally.
Yeah.
And it comes back to it's reading and listening to Warren Buffett with Berkshire Hathaway, he does an annual, the annual talk for a shareholders meeting.
I just read about
He
that.
writes a letter, right? So I love to listen to that because here's someone I've been through, 2 or 3 recessions. Here's someone who's been through them since the 1920s.
Yeah.
Right. So, wow, what a wealth of knowledge. Like he's been an investor since he was 15 or 13 potentially, whereas when he first started investing in stocks and has seen all these cycles and has had companies lasted through all the decades. So I like to listen to people like that who've been through it and can provide a little bit of perspective of say, okay, from a business owner, here's what we're going through now. And that's where I like to get my sources of information from. If I can wrap it up, is people who've been there, done that, seen it, and how are they responding and how are they communicating about what they're seeing today and how it relates to, what we've seen in the past from a business perspective. And like you said, how do you prepare yourself as a business owner? Like, so for me, like that's one of my best readings is his annual letter, right? Yeah. And that goes back decades, and just seeing understanding where the economy was at the time, understanding where his head was at the time, and understanding what his plans on a go forward basis. And I also read a lot of books. I read a lot of books from business owners who've done exactly what it is that I'm trying to accomplish, right? There's a very specific reason why I own the companies that I own today. And a lot of that has to do with, teachings that I've learned from people like Warren Buffett, and being able to look at, you talked about profit and losses, being able to look at a financial statement and, over a history of 5 to 10 years and understand the picture that's telling you about the strength of that company, and then areas that you can improve in as you compare it to other companies. So I say to this, like, even if you're at home right now and you've got nothing to do, and I don't understand the mentality, but if you're at home, you have nothing to do. Yeah. Okay. Now is your opportunity to pick up some books and read and learn about something. So if you're interested in businesses and you don't know how to read a financial statement, and unfortunately a lot of business owners do, I have a problem with that.
Yep.
Right? I have a problem with that. You should fundamentally, and I don't say you have to go to the moon with this stuff. You don't have to be an expert,
right?
But you should be able to read it. And there's lots of books out there that you can read that will help you. So now's the time to build your knowledge. That'll help you understand financial statements, because when you understand a financial statement, you can look at a bunch of them and look at them and say, okay, here's the strength of these companies. And as you work on your own company, you can look at your own company and say, okay, let's make sure that we're operating in the way that these strong companies operate, and not operating in the way that these weak companies operate that have way too much debt relative to their cash and cash flows. And when you have that combination, it's a recipe for disaster. And like a lot of the companies that are going out of business today, if you looked at their financial statements going into this, it's very easy to predict where and when they're going to run out of cash based on a drop in revenues. They can figure it out. It's not complicated. But having said that, they could have figured that out in January. They were looking at it and say, okay, ask that tough question. What happens if revenues drop?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then start bullet pointing it and finding out how to prepare for those. That's right.
Mm-hmm. But, it comes down to, I can't, so some people don't have, so for me, and you speak the same language, Mike, for me, when I look at stuff, I'm thinking long-term. So when I'm thinking long-term, I look at it in that respect. And a lot of people, I grant it, they may not understand it, but if you don't understand it, get some knowledge or get someone on your team that does.
Yeah, there's this crazy thing called Google and YouTube that can likely teach you. People always ask me, how'd you learn business stuff? I was like, Google, YouTube. That was my MBA. Like that's what I got. That was my MBA. Like it's the truth though. Like everybody, there's so much. We're so lucky to have a wealth of knowledge out there. It's insane. Hey, if our listeners want to find you before we let you go, if our listeners want to find you, where can they find you, Kosi?
The best way to get in touch with me is actually through my Instagram. And you talk about free information is, once a week I sit down, I do a book review with my followers. We sit down and I review a book, that meant a lot to me, and I talk about how I've implemented the book in my life. So once a week I do a live book review, and then outside of that, once a week I post anywhere from 1 to 3 times a day, and it's really just insights that I have on business, real estate, life, and here's what I'm thinking, here's where I'm going, and then you can, and I interact, and if you write me a message, I'll reply to you, and we can have a bit of a conversation. But yeah, it's, to be honest, Mike, I love this stuff.
Yeah.
I love, interacting with you, talking about business. I love talking about business. I love business. I love sharing what I've learned over the last, 15 years. Like, some people like to ski. Some people like to play sports. Some people like to do all sorts of stuff. Like, for me, I get excited learning about businesses, potential business opportunity, analyzing real estate. That is my excitement. So for me, it's like I can spend 16 hours a day doing this for decades, right? Yeah. I remember when I was 19, someone said, hey, if you keep doing this, you're going to burn yourself out. And that was like 20 years ago, and I haven't stopped. And it's because I enjoy it so much, right?
What's your Instagram URL or your handle? I'm sorry.
It's The Property Owl.
The Property Owl. Kosi Stobbs. Guys, check him out. Google him. Kosi, thanks so much for dropping some knowledge bombs with us today.
Appreciate being here. It's a lot of fun.
Life Nation, you got to remember that in order for things to change, you must change. And in order for things to get better, you must get better. You just got better by hanging out with me, Michael Libas, and the Business and Life Nation. So come back tomorrow, because I'm here dropping sound bombs 7 days a week, baby. If you'd like to subscribe, please do, so you can take action and execute. See you tomorrow.